On this segment, we have with us the former Minister of Works and Housing, Mr. Babatunde Raji Fashola. He'll be speaking to us about his new book, Nigerian Public Discourse. He will also be speaking on the state of the nation. You can join the conversation much later. You can call us on 081 076 41679, 090 2416 3440. You can also tweet to us at TVC Entertainment using the Your View on TVC hashtag. Welcome to the show, sir.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. It's good to have you back after many long years. We're happy to have you back.
Good to be here.
So, we got a copy of your monograph. And I think I've almost finished it, and I think I couldn't stop it. And I think it's such a good book that I've read because I love the fact that you highlighted the key issues Nigerians talk about, and you gave your perspective. Let's start with why you thought this was necessary to have this book in the first place.
Okay, this book is hopefully meant to provoke intellectual rigor to our developmental issues and the way we talk about our country and about ourselves and all of those kind of things. Now, it started as an act of provocation itself.
Right.
About 2 years ago. I was having a conversation with some of my staff and some of my colleagues, and then a debate ensued. And somebody said, look, why don't you put this down and write? I said, I don't have the time to write. I'm busy with files and all that. I said, okay, you know what? I'll bring a recorder. You can dictate all your thoughts. I will transcribe them. And that's how it started. So we had this session after session after session, and he was kind enough to help my special assistant on legal matters, Mr. Lanre Akinshola. He transcribed my entire dictation. That was 2 years ago. So I started the editorial work, and then I lost the manuscript that I had edited. So, of course, I had the backup on the system, but without the edit. So I just left it alone until then, after I left office. And the conversation started again. I said, look, we've talked about this, and somebody said, okay, you know what? Let me do the edit for you, since you don't want to touch it again. So put together a team of people to edit it, and then they sent it back to me, and then I did the final edit. So here we are.
Right, good.
Let me quickly just say, this is an SEN's language. As you know, I read simple. I always have to interpret to simple English to comprehend things, and it took me a while. I saw that it was detailed. I used to think BRF the governor. I always forget the SEN part, but this is like going back to school. It's a very, I call it a book that sparks critical thinking, making people question what you hear, what you're used to. Usually we'll just hear things in Nigeria and we'll fly with it. But reading the book, I kept thinking Nigerians should go deep into critical thinking. So was that one of your objectives, to spark the conversation amongst general Nigerians, not necessarily people in public service, or just spark that critical thinking, the power to question everything that you see? Because I like one of the lines where you use the Paraji story, I think, the football, I'm trying to remember.
India.
And the India experience. Yeah, you know, the football. Thunder Balogun story. And I have never questioned it. I have also never questioned the Okun and
the lagoon water.
In fact, I thought it would be a cost to try it.
Yes.
You know, so reading that, and I was like, is that the intention? You know, to get
you know, it's like a deja vu moment, if you like, listening to you saying that it's already provoking you to question things, and that really was the objective, and that's why I said the hope is that it will provoke intellectual rigor, it will provoke us to ask questions about things, and if you look at the much vexed issue about how many we are, for example, population. And that's a big planning
Number keeps changing.
A big issue. If you look at why is it that we fix supposedly minimum wage, but we end up with paying everybody salary upgrades, and then it can be implemented, but in other countries, minimum wage works. So those are things that I think we should all interrogate. If you look at conversations about, we have housing deficit of
17 million.
awkward numbers of millions, and which country has that? So we just need to put some rigor again into all of these questions. And
you get a few more questions. Go ahead.
So, sir, of course, what everyone has said already, which for me, I understood immediately that you're trying to raise a group of, not just a particular group, but Nigerians to be, in our conversations, to be more fact-driven, credible. And, you know, you also mentioned the fact that we tend to just lean into public sentimentalism. And for me, it was more like a charge to especially those of us who have platforms. And when we speak, are we really honest that we are brave enough to speak credibly, even when it's not what the public is expecting us to say, or even when the public is finding it hard to receive? So I just thought that was more a charge to those who have platforms. And before it would have been just TV or radio, you can go to those places, they have NBC. But now we have people with phones in their homes, and they are influencing hundreds and thousands of people in Nigeria and across. You know, so what do you hope, you know, someone with a phone that gets this book would learn from your book?
Well, I do hope that there will be the discernment to decide whether to push something as fact or to caution your audience to say, I can't verify this, but I heard it. And there's a very, very thin line between all of that. And it's a very important point that you take about the rule. For example, if you look at the way we have seemingly conflated our governments with our country. Yeah. So every time our government lets us down, is the country that we throw under the bus. But the country has done nothing to us. Nigeria has done nothing to us.
Totally agree.
I read, you know, that thing you just said now. I read it in page 94.
Yeah.
And I was going to use it as my closing remark, but since you mentioned it,
Let's go there.
Let's go there. And it made me cry when I read that part. Like a tear dropped. It says, we must understand that government is different from country. We must criticize government and politicians without throwing our country under the bus. This is possible. Governments will change. Politicians will come and go. But the territory of the Federal Republic of Nigeria
remains.
Will outlive us. Let us enhance the power, prestige, and good name of Nigeria for ourselves and the generations to come. Honestly, that broke my heart. Because for a second, I'm like, oh my goodness, what have I done to my nation? What are we doing to our nation? What are we doing to this territory? What am I handing over to my child based on the conversations we're seeing? Yeah. So it really breaks me as a citizen that, okay, listen, we need to really be conscious of what we're doing. But let's not go ahead of ourselves because there's so much to break down. Yeah. Let me let BC have our opening statement, then we'll take it gradually. Go ahead.
So you also harped on, the book is lovely, by the way. I studied political science in school, and like Nima rightly said, it took me back to class. Like, this kind of conversation, I'm not ready to sit down and listen and have it, you know. But you mentioned incorrect narrative going around and how we're not able to get proper data for certain things. And you give instances of where some laws are already been moved from the federal to the government, and after a while it goes back into the federal books, and the new crop of politicians need to begin to ask these questions and, you know, draw the line. Now, what would you suggest in regards to politicians understanding the laws that they have, the states knowing the laws, knowing their jurisdiction? How do you expect them to go about this so that we don't have conflicting interests at every point in time? And there's also another case I think we took last week in the papers where the waterways between Lagos and the federal government was under question. Yes, Niwa.
Excuse me.
Yes, yeah.
Now, if as some people say, that politics is a game, how many know the rules? And the rules are there, the Constitution. How many of us even read it? And when I urge people to read the Constitution, they tell me, oh, I'm not a lawyer. I said, no, it's written in very simple English.
It is.
First of all. Secondly, you don't have to memorize
The sections,
everything
yeah.
by heart, but you can read 1 page or 2 pages every morning. And you will see that there's a lot there that we're not aware of. For example, people expect that a president, look at the powers of the president, for example, that
He has
we
all
broke down.
powers.
Everybody said, oh, the president is all too powerful. And all presidents have been. In fact, some have said Nigerian president is the most powerful. But going through the constitution, you see that the president is mentioned about 48 or 49 times in the edition of the constitution that I used for the book before the last amendment of the constitution in 2023. And in all of those places, we seem to have conflicted the powers, his duties, and functions.
Wow.
All together and aggregated all of them as powers. He has duties, he has powers, he has functions, and none of them is without a countervailing force, either approval of the National Assembly, confirmation of this, and subject to such other powers. So he's not that all too powerful president that we think. And then unlike the United States, where one of their vice presidents famously described himself, I believe, as a spare tire, our vice president is not a spare tire.
Wow.
The Constitution makes very clear provisions. He's chairman of the National Economic Council, which is a very, very big institution for advising the president on economic matters.